Friday, and that means it's time for more Discovery CSI with David Hawkins. David, lovely to see you again.
Yes, Jason, it's good to be with you. Thanks.
We've got a very intriguing topic today. I think a lot of viewers of Crowdsource the Truth have become familiarized with a certain George Henry Sweigert, not to be confused with the various YouTubers who share that same surname. We're talking, of course, about the gentleman who is credited with having invented the cordless phone. And David, yet again, you've brought another matter to my attention that I was totally unaware of, which was a phone call made by Jon Bennet Ramsey, the father of young Jon Bennet, on a cordless phone to the Boulder, Colorado police. And of course, we'll be exploring that in depth in our Patreon show. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but today we've got just a little bit of an unusually short schedule here on YouTube, and we want to encourage viewers, of course, to visit the Patreon pages where our exclusive content is hosted every Friday. And I'm talking, of course, about patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Over to you.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Jason. Sorry. What do they call that? Dead air, right?
No, that's okay.
Anyway, so, well, today is a classic example of what I think people who follow you and I can discover is that we are involved in real-time discovery. So this morning I wake up, I know you've been getting a lot of harassment from this guy Sweigert, and I know that his father invented granted a patent in 1966 for this cordless telephone. And I thought, well, wonder if the Ramseys used a cordless phone, which would obviously be vulnerable to what is known as a man-in-the-middle attack. And incidentally, I don't say the Brits invented man-in-the-middle attack, but I do say they're very good at it. And one of the earliest man-in-the-middle attacks, a very well-known one, was the spy master for Elizabeth I, Sir Francis Walsingham, who intercepted a message smuggled out in the bung of a beer barrel from the prison where Mary Queen of Scots was incarcerated. And she had secreted a message in code, my understanding, that was...
Secreted a message from the bung. I see.
Well, yes. Well, you see, you get everything when you're interviewing me. You get a full raft of English humor.
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, secreted in the bung was a message to Mary Queen of Scots' Spanish and French supporters who were Catholics. Mm. And at the end of that message, Sir Francis Walsingham got his programmer or coder or whatever it was called in those days to add a postscript that looked like Mary Queen of Scots was planning to have her half-sister assassinated. She wasn't, but it did result in the decapitation of Mary Queen of Scots, bung secreted or not, right? Now, the tragedy of that is man-in-the-middle attacks are notoriously, if they're well executed, difficult to detect. So fast forward to that cordless phone, and I believe it was Patty Ramsey who put the phone call into the 911 and the police, and she was in a total panic because she'd just read the ransom note, and her daughter presumably, well, obviously was out of the bedroom, had been taken from the bedroom. She put the call in, but apparently the 911 dispatcher, police, they all heard voices on the phone after the Ramseys said it had been hung up. Mm. So then I thought of your friend George Sweigert.
Well, it's David George Sweigert.
Okay. David George Sweigert, yeah. The son of Sweigert.
But isn't that interesting? Sorry to interrupt, David, but that's an interesting point. We've got George Henry Sweigert, David George Sweigert, and George Webb Sweigert. So between those three, there are frequent confusions of who is who.
Well, there are confusions, and there are also the fascinating path of a patent that was granted to George H. Sweigert, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, in 1966 by the Patent Office. And then obviously all of these patents are subject to what are known as some combination of submarining frauds or continuation frauds, where a slight change is made in the core of the patent that buys them another 20, 25 years. Now, of course, these patents can be very lucrative. That is to say, the benefits of a patent of 1966 can be passed through the estate of the late George H. Sweigert to those of his sons, who may then be receiving periodically checks for the use of either the original patent or the continuation or submarine components of that patent. Now, here is the sinister thing that I believe RCA GB 1929 became, in a management buyout and an IPO of 1988, 1989, structured, I believe, by Wilbur Ross of N.M. Rothschild and Sons, became Serco. And Serco, as we know, thanks to your brilliant interview with Wilbur Ross, well, it was a kind of short interview. He obviously was a bit begrudging with his words, where he said that the Patent Office is an arm of government which runs itself, and he didn't come there to talk about Serco after you'd asked him about Serco and Serco's claim of processing a 4 millionth patent out of the total 10 million patents processed through the Patent Office. So it's ridiculous. You have a British company, an outsourcing company, that is processing patents and is in a superb position and is using AI algorithms to determine how to classify and where to place these patents. That is the cream of invention and new technology by American citizens is being processed by a British company, which puts it in a superb position for man-in-the-middle attacks on the United States, including the attacks of 9/11, and I suggest the organized killing of little Jon Bennet Ramsey. So what I'm absolutely gobsmacked, if that's the right word, by is how you and I have developed a chemistry which are really asking our supporters, and I think I've said before, I value enormously their contribution, their financial contribution. But I think now to succeed in a time frame that before I shuffle off my mortal coil, right, we need to start thinking about going viral and asking our friends through Patreon to talk to their friends and steer them towards our kind of shows. As you know, we've got a Patreon only show coming up in 15, 30, 40 minutes or whatever. And start to nail these scumbags, because I think with a man-in-the-middle attack, what they can do is execute, as I say, red line deaths in Zulu time. Now, what do I mean by that? The all-red line, basically the first undersea cable to be laid in what would become the all-red line in a total global spanning network by before World War I, was laid in 1858 between Ireland and Newfoundland in Canada.
That's astonishing.
It is astonishing. And something else happened about that time, although it wasn't called Zulu time, is that the railways, many of which had been funded by N.M. Rothschild, as was the undersea line, decided that the total confusion, because, I don't know, trains were running into each other, and it's extremely difficult from a passenger point of view to know when to get off a train and get onto another one, they decided that they would all merge their time schedules onto Greenwich Mean Time through the Meridian in London. And if ever any of your listeners or you get to London and you're interested in the history of time or time telling or horology or precision chronometers, I suggest or invite you to go to the Greenwich Maritime Museum, where the first 5 prototypes of the marine by John Harrison. My late father was a clock collector, so we had about 60 or 70 clocks at our home in England, and it was either my brother's or my job to wind them up on Sunday morning. So Sunday midday and synchronize them. Sunday midday, you had to get out of the house because everything was dinging and donging and banging, etc., etc.
I hope you had Scotty dogs protecting the clocks.
We had Dachshund dogs that were trained with very sharp teeth to protect them, because some of them were quite valuable. But anyway, we were very interested in horology, and I went on an antiquarian horological trip to Austria, which was fascinating. Wow. But back to John Harrison, he won the 20,000-pound Admiralty Prize in the late 18th century, 17 whatever, for his invention of the marine chronometer that could be put on a ship, a sailing ship, that would leave Bristol, for example, on a trip to Jamaica and back, several months of trip, and it would not gain or lose more than 5 seconds in that trip. A huge, and it's a wonderful piece of precision engineering. And some of those early devices are obviously worth a great deal of money. But more to the point, it allowed the Admiralty to calculate longitude of the ships with great precision. And I would say a major competitive advantage for the empire, if you will, was the precision by which its ships, particularly the Royal Navy and the British East India Company, could assemble at places to take on the likes of Napoleon in the Battle of Trafalgar and that sort of thing. So it's a huge competitive advantage to know where you are if you're going to war with an enemy, and to establish a timing signal or sequence that is more accurate than your enemy's. So on 911, what I suggest is people in the Pentagon would look at their wristwatches or up at the panel clock up on the wall, would vary by 5 to 10 minutes, whereas the Red Attack Team, with access to timing signals generated by devices in the patent office in the United Kingdom and the United States, were accurate in terms of their internal coordination and synchronization to within a second. And that's why America lost the 9/11 war. Over to you.
It's a fascinating theory that you're presenting, David, and frankly, every week you're bringing up new topics that boggle most people's minds. We've got actually with us in the comments right now a Periscope viewer named Jeffrey Bailey, who is saying, Brits control U.S. patents, ? Which leads me to presume that we've got a number of viewers who are with us now who perhaps are not familiar with the long-standing theories and facts that you've presented related to Serco, the biggest company that many people have never heard of. I definitely encourage Jeffrey Bailey and others who aren't familiar with what we're talking about to join us in just 18 minutes on patreon.com/CSI Storyboards, as well as patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, where we're going to be doing our exclusive live stream. Of course, CSI Storyboards is David's Patreon page, and it's extremely important that people who value this information become supporters. There's multiple reasons why we've come to rely on Patreon. Of course, David and I both require food to live, so we need a way to monetize this effort. And almost every single video that we do, David, it's receiving a message from YouTube that it's not suitable for advertising. So the only way we can continue to bring this information is by relying on viewer support, as we have. So it's an interesting way for us to bring information that might otherwise be stricken from YouTube, and for us to keep this sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely right. And going back to the invention of the cordless phone, I found it very interesting, the bio of George H. Sweigert, who lived from 1920 to 1999, so 33 years after his patent was granted. He lived
33.
And his patent was granted in 66, and then so he died in 99, right?
Wow.
And he admired a number of people. I'm just looking at the bio, including an Edwin Armstrong and his invention of FM radio. Armstrong's concept of the supraheterodyne receiver to filter out noise and amplify the original signal is used in the cordless phone. And he, that is Sweigert, also admired Armstrong's courage to challenge the status quo of AM radio and its powerful leader, David Sarnoff.
Interesting.
Now, David Sarnoff was obviously the leader of RCA. Probably he managed to steal a lot of Marconi patents, right? He would have formed RCA GB 1929 in the United Kingdom as a wholly owned subsidiary. And RCA GB 1929 became Serco, that now runs your patent office in the United States of America.
Which Wilbur Ross does not want to discuss.
No. Now, the fascinating thing about what I call the DNA of a patent is particularly the ability of a corrupt patent lawyer to engage in what are known as continuation or submarine frauds. In the case of Jerome Lemelson, for example, with 605 patents under his belt, Jerome Lemelson, as you know, has a patent granted to him or his estate, presumably, which is now a beneficiary, for prisoner tracking, where prisoner privileges are distributed and calculated and estimated by artificial intelligence expert system or fuzzy logic algorithm. And there's nothing in the coding of a computer algorithm to prevent a distribution of rewards to a prisoner, like, for example, we'll give you 24 hours or 36 hours of furlough to go and rape, sodomize, and obtain a snuff film of a little girl's death, right? Because we need it, right? So now what do you end up with? You end up with a deliverable, which is a film that can be shown up the command chain of the parent of little Jon Bennet Ramsey, which is Jon Bennet Ramsey, who was the chief executive officer of Access Graphics, which had won major upgrade contracts in the Pentagon. And John Ramsey's bosses in Lockheed Martin, which at the time of her murder would have included Lynn Cheney and Norman Mineta. And you can see the role of Lynn Cheney and Norman Mineta was to stand down United States defenses during the 9/11 attack. Now, whether they did that willingly or unwillingly, wittingly or unwittingly, for me is irrelevant. They have custody of patented devices responsible for the wrongful deaths of nearly 3,000 people on 9/11. So we need to haul these people into a civilian court, a civil court on civil action. And coming back to our support, yours and mine, with the Patreon, I once again invite our Patreon supporters, and I value the money that you send us. Equally, if not more important, is the extent to which our Patreon supporters can go out and ask a friend or a friend's friend, 2 or 3 people, develop a multiplier effect to come to this show, because I don't think there's any other show anywhere in the world, Jason, where we can do real-time discovery to this level of technical analysis. Over to you.
I agree with you, David. We've been really doing some fascinating work, and I love the way you and I sort of inspire each other and cause each other to look in areas and at facts and details that we might otherwise not. We're going to be continuing with our exclusive live stream in just about 12 minutes, so we'll wrap it up here right now on YouTube, David, but I will remind people who are watching they should tune in to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And at 2 p.m. Eastern, right now, in just 12 minutes, we're going to be continuing our conversation and digging deeper into the fascinating discoveries that David has made as he unravels the patents and the connection between all of these different matters. So I look forward to seeing everyone on Patreon. Thanks for watching.